Foreign Minister Marise Payne, who's speaking in New Zealand.
There's no doubt in my mind that the quick action by all of these people, as well as those extraordinarily courageous members of the community who responded, has indeed saved lives. I also want to thank our High Commissioner in New Zealand, Patricia Forsyth, our Consul General here in Auckland, Craig Knowles, and their teams who have done very, very hard yards in the last week in supporting Australians impacted by these events. I want to thank the Crisis and Consular team of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra, led by Andrew Todd, who is here with me on this visit. They have also been working extremely hard, including sending multiple consular officers here to support our teams on the ground in both Auckland and in Wellington. Yesterday in Wellington and today in Auckland, I've had the opportunity to meet with Prime Minister Ardern, with Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Winston Peters, to convey directly to them Australia's deep appreciation for the efforts that have been made to support those Australians impacted, for everything that this country has done, for victims and families, of course, from Australia, but also to understand that we have citizens of the United States, of China, of Malaysia, of Germany and of Britain who are also affected by this tragedy. In the last 2 days, I have visited Hutt Hospital and Middlemore Hospital here today to convey Australia's thanks for the superlative care provided to Australians who've been injured in these events, and importantly also to their families. I have spoken with our Australian consular officials who've been supporting families, and I've also met today with members of the Australian Disaster Victim Identification teams from the Australian Federal Police and from State Police in Queensland and New South Wales. Unfortunately, all of those people have extraordinary experience in this work, and they've, in the last week, worked incredibly closely with their counterparts here in New Zealand to make sure that that process was robust, that it has integrity, that it satisfies coronial requirements, and they have done that every single step of the way. They're returning to Australia this afternoon, and I convey my sincere thanks to them for what they have done to support this process. I've also acknowledged and thanked members of the Ngāti Awa here in New Zealand for their great sensitivity at a time when they are also grieving. If you have seen some of the statements issued by families, you will know how much they have appreciated that very important cultural underpinning in the days since last Monday. As I discussed with Prime Minister Ardern yesterday, I regard this as truly an ANZ effort. No delineation. Every single person I've spoken to has used the word seamless. And in time of crisis, in a time of tragedy, then that says a great deal. The repatriation process, the medical evacuations of 12 Australians proceeded so well that it is like we were moving from just one hospital to the next, not across countries, not across the Tasman Sea, but in an absolutely powerful way. So we've pulled together. We've worked together at this time of enormous tragedy. In terms of Australian citizens, and we know that the identification process was finalised yesterday, and we know that we have 10 deceased Australians who've been formally identified, and 1 Australian listed as officially missing and presumed dead. We have 1 Australian who passed away here in hospital in New Zealand, 12 Australians who were medically evacuated. One of those Australians has very sadly passed away in a hospital in Sydney. We also have 3 Australian permanent residents who have died here in hospital in New Zealand, and 1 who has been medically evacuated to Australia. I'll conclude my remarks today by saying I don't think any one of us can begin to imagine what those families are facing in the coming weeks and months. Here in places like Auckland, in Sydney, we're surrounded by Christmas and celebration, but they face tragedy and devastation, and our hearts and thoughts are with them every step of the way. Thank you.
Of the 2 people who remain unaccounted for, one has been identified as an Australian, Winona Langford, who sadly lost both her parents. Her brother was also injured in the eruption. From the advice you have received, are police confident of being able to locate her body?
I know that every effort is being made by police and I believe Defence members to locate the 2 missing people from White Island. They will make every single effort they are able to, I know, and they have in past days. Weather is currently again conspiring against them, and that is a very dangerous environment in which they are working. We know how difficult the retrieval itself was on Friday, and weather is compounding it. The nature of volcanic eruption, the toxicity that goes with that is compounding it. But they will do everything they can. We are assured of that. There are major operational undertakings in place for this work, and I will wait to hear from New Zealand authorities as to next steps.
When you spoke to the Prime Minister of New Zealand, did you ask at all questions around how on earth this could happen? Obviously so many Australians have been lost as a result of this.
My absolute focus here is on the victims and their families. I know that New Zealand will pursue its own inquiries in relation to those sorts of matters, but here in Wellington and in Auckland today, my absolute focus is on victims and their families. I had a very valuable meeting with both the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister to discuss the response, to discuss our engagement with New Zealand. Again, the word seamless comes to the fore in that conversation. And I also know, and said this to both the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, that these are ongoing challenges. The health system in New Zealand, the burn system in particular, has surged above and beyond what anyone could have ever logically